Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation. I'm going to say a few things about what we're planning in WWRP. I want to thank Gilbert for giving me a really good introduction and motivation for a lot of what I'm about to say, because there's a lot of consistency. So we have a current implementation plan in WWRP, which ends at the end of 2023. You will see that we have 3 core projects, as Estelle mentioned. Of course, the one we're focusing on here is the Polar Prediction Project that's been going since 2012, and it is in its 10th year. This is one of 3 core projects. You also see our working groups. We have 7 there on the left, of course, cross-cutting with the WGNI group, Working Group on Numerical Experimentation in WCRP, and the links with WCRP are quite important. And our societal challenges there listed on the right. But we need a new implementation plan. But before I get into that, I just want to say a few words. I mean, we've already talked about the well-deserved praise heard today for all the achievements of PPP and YOP, the innovation in science, taking an Earth system approach really to the polar regions, the integration of observations and models, and laying the foundation for the future. Importantly, defining a community of research and convening that community. I think that's a really important function of the project. And of course, running a project really well with the communication, providing data, the YOP data portal now developing is a key aspect for others to engage, and securing funding. All of these things are just symptomatic of a really well-run project, and congratulations to the entire team. Now, our WWRP future drivers, there are a number of these. We did a community survey. We've actually been at this for almost a year, seeking input on the overall elements of our plan. Evaluating the impact, ask the question, what is happening because of what WWRP is doing? And I think that's foremost on our mind. But the connection of research and operations, and enhancing the capacity in developing countries. When we look at our polar regions, there are a lot of communities that really can benefit from the research that we're doing, and I think it's up to us to bridge what I think is still a gap in providing the services that are necessary. We have a number of other drivers from WMO, the new strategic plan of WMO, which is also 24 to 27, climate action, hydrology, water management, our basic observing system, where YOP and PPP definitely have a role to play, have had a role to play, and will still, and our Earth system approach, like I mentioned. We have an umbrella concept for the new implementation plan, which we're calling AWARE. And AWARE is not a project. AWARE is a set of goals and really aspirations that we want to ensure that the work that's done is collaborative, that it reaches the audiences intended, that, for instance, forecasters and decision makers are aware of the tools that they have. As a scientist, that we are doing an excellent job in communicating what we do and inviting the communities into our work. This is underlain with projects, and I'll say a few words about those new projects in a moment. One of them, as I think Barbara mentioned, this Polar Coupled Analysis and Prediction, PCAP. And the expertise that fuels these projects really comes from our working groups, as you saw a couple of slides ago. So this is our scientific community. It's a vibrant community, and it is an evolving community, and I think it will be evolving continually to meet these new challenges. So let me say a little bit about the new projects that we're proposing. We had a symposium last week, so a lot of this is fresh off the press. Although we've been planning for a long time, I think this was a wonderful opportunity, first time in 3 years that our community has convened and really talking about what these projects will be about. I'm really only going to talk about the first one. You can see that we have a wide variety of kinds of projects to consider. Some of these continue and build on the legacy of core projects, and others are injecting very new ideas, such as the integration of hydrology and precipitation. Our timeline is fairly aggressive. We are submitting our new implementation plan to the research board of WMO in just over 2 weeks. I will say that in that plan, the definition of these new projects will be at a very high level. This is more of a concept in plan at this point that will need to go through approval through Executive Council and Congress in the upcoming 6 months or so. So it is fairly ambitious here. Here we go. Now our symposium, and some folks who are in this room right now were participating in that. We thank them very much, talking about the needs of indigenous communities, the Inuit communities that Gita spoke about. Makiel talked about all the complexity of users, of information in the polar regions. Thomas made the case for high resolution, and you'll hear high resolution again. Also attribution studies where we can really understand the contribution of climate change to extreme events. So thank to them very much for stimulating discussions that got our groups really talking. So let me say a few words about PCAP. And like I mentioned, there is room for filling in details. This is not, we're not at this point saying that we have all the details worked out. These are concepts. I think we have to consider both poles for sure. There's a lot of progress right now through the op consolidation phase in observations and model intercomparisons. That's really important. Driving at both improving our models, yes, but I would also say the data assimilation in a coupled framework to really make the atmosphere, ocean, land ice, sea ice consistent as a starting point for any prediction activities is fundamental, and really looking at how we can harness these improved products for inhabitants, whether they be indigenous or research infrastructure or otherwise in these regions. And the next couple of slides will provide a few more details. I think many of you would recognize the challenges in these regions from infrastructure, the need for very high resolution, kilometer scale information in many cases for decision making, training, building trust with stakeholders, the fact that we have to make more out of the observations we have, especially satellite observations. On one hand, yes, the poles are not well observed. On the other hand, from remote sensing, they're extremely well observed with polar orbiting satellites. So it depends on making the most out of what we have and addressing these processes that are hard to model. As we know, the stable boundary layer, mixed phase clouds, and a couple of processes, especially coupling in the components, but also cross latitudes, and I think that was illustrated in the previous presentation. So plenty of challenges, but I think there are a lot of opportunities here. So this slide really says a few goals about what the project is about. The first three are really the interaction with communities, so the society part of this. And what I want to emphasize is that in our new plan, the coupling of the social and physical science elements are going to be crucial to achieve, I think, the applications and the resulting services that are necessary, bringing the science to where it's useful. And the bottom four bullets there are really kind of stating a lot of what I've already said, but again, emphasizing the high resolution and the coupling. Just as an aside, Gilbert mentioned using the Met Office model for the high resolution forecast supportive operations in Antarctica, and this is a system very similar. The Antarctic Mesoscale Prediction System has been actually running for about 2 decades, built on the WRF model, and this is just an example I pulled out of a real-time forecast from yesterday, noting the very strong embedded jets within the katabatic flow near the Ross Sea. So WWRP cannot do this all by itself and is going to rely on a series of partnerships. I won't detail all these partnerships, but I think you'll hear some of them in the course of this meeting. Certainly building on existing relationships we have with communities. We can't go out and invent those relationships in the short term. They take years to develop. And I think a lot of the scientists in this room have been working in that area, and that's really going to be important as we look to, who is this for? Who is going to benefit from the work that we do? All countries, as has been mentioned, end use. Finally, just one last thing, and I'll wrap up here, is how these projects will work. Each project will have a steering group, roughly 12 members, and it'll be a composite of WWRP scientists and partner representatives, and this is where we build in the partnerships. This group will be formed for PCAP in 2023, and we'll have the task of actually writing the science plan. So the science plan is not written now. It is written once the experts convene and have time to discuss over the course of 2023, so that we're launching this in 2024, and have taken into account the appropriate connections and stakeholder engagement that we need to make a solid plan that's going to be successful. Again, the period of the project is 24 to 28. And I think I will stop there, and if there's any time for questions, I'll take them now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Any questions? Let's see. So Ian first. So microphone in.
Yeah, one of the reasons YOP was such a good success, I think you've acknowledged that, was a really strong international coordination office in Bremerhaven. I was wondering if you envisaged something similar for PCAP.
We'll have to have something like that, and some coordination will be through this steering group, but I think you need an administrative anchor, I think, to make projects like this work successfully. But I haven't got as far as what that'll look like, but yes, I think it's a great idea.
Question in the back.
Can you say a few more words about co-development of research ideas and also the importance for funding agencies maybe to revise their way of funding, because when we work with people in the north, the time scale are very different. So can you elaborate a little bit on this, like what is the right there?
So I couldn't quite hear the question. If you could use the microphone, it would, online could help here. Sorry.
You mentioned the importance of co-developing research team, research ideas, like with the northern communities. So could you elaborate a little bit on this, and like our funding agency should a bit revise maybe their way of funding research, because working with people in the north, it implies different timescales, and often sometimes I feel there's a bit of a disconnect between the way funding agency operate and the way the new reality of wanting to work with people in the north, wanting to co-develop research and science questions. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on this.
So I'm still having trouble understanding. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble understanding. I don't hear very well.
I guess the question is a bit
yes.
more on timescales. That the funding agency has a sort of timescale, and some of these challenges.
No, but co-development of research question means going to the community, means having discussion with the local community, means identifying research questions that they're interested in.
Oh,
so
yes.
this implies a whole before a call is sent out for the community. It means a lot of work upstream, which in the current system is not always possible to do. So I was wondering if you could, if you are taking such initiative to actually make this more seamless.
Yeah, okay, I understand now. Sorry. Yes. So I think I see it in the course of this project. We will have to begin with relationships that exist and knowledge of what those priorities are for communities that we already have built relationships with. It does take a long time, and so what I would view this project as doing in parallel is building new relationships. These projects are envisioned as 5 years. They may be renewed for another 5, depending on how things go. And it could, and I can see a 2-phase approach in that sense, where we start with existing relationships, we build new ones during the first 5 years, and those may come to fruition in the longer term. So that is at least what I'm thinking about. I hope this addresses your question.
Thank you, Ben.
Just as a question, you mentioned focus on the indigenous scientists operating in the polar region, but it's really more than that. I mean, especially in the Arctic, the transport, Australia would like to have a forecast for the icebreaker. Of course, there is a defense of many countries which would like to have that information in those regions. So, is it why do this focus? You get a lot of leverage from having the others also.
Of course, yeah. I mention it because I think it's probably the most difficult piece. But yes, I mean, there will be national, international interest in the information, and I think we have to work as an international community to provide consistent information on some of these things, like you mentioned, short-term forecasts of breaking ice and storms in the Arctic, especially in the transition season from winter to fall. Yes.